and what might tattoos be on them. And so on Halloween, after they got back from trick-or-treating, I'm like, okay, you guys, they're sorting their candy. And I'm like, tell mommy how she's messed up. Come on. I'm like, I can take it, you know. I'm like, besides, I need an example for Sunday morning. I'm like, so come on, let me have it. And so, you know, they're distracted by the candy. So they're not really thinking of anything. They're not coming up with anything. And in my mind, I've got several instances of where I have messed up as a parent. And so I'm just kind of anxious to see what they say. And they didn't say anything. And I'm like, come on, I need an example by Sunday. And then Evan, as he's sorting candy, just nonchalantly goes, Mom, you'll mess up again before Sunday. And I'm like, oh my word, like you have no examples, but you're just totally confident that I'm going to mess up in the next few days. And he was right, because, okay, here's the story. So he's getting braces, but they had to put the expander bar in there first, you know, where it's that permanent bar. So we're driving home from the orthodontist, and at the orthodontist, they had told him that you can't eat candy. You know, like the taffy and the goopy and the gum and the sticky stuff. And so, by the way, this is the day after Halloween. And so we're driving home, and Evan's in the back seat, and he's like, Mom, why did you make the appointment for the day after Halloween? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right, it could have waited a week, you know? And so I'm like, oh, Evan, I'm so sorry. You know, I just totally wasn't thinking. I made the appointment, and, you know, I'm not sure that's going to cost us too much in therapy, but, you know, anyway. So now we've been enjoying a lot of taffy at our house. All of us make mistakes. You know, as parents, we make mistakes. As humans, we make mistakes because we are, as Kurt has mentioned at the beginning of the series, we are just all naturally separated from God. And we have these orphan tendencies because we're fallen. And we're just separated from the life that God would have for us. And so we're born into this condition. You know, it's called sin. And it's like we don't do the right things. We don't think the right things. And so guess what this means? This means that your parents were broken and fallen. And they hurt you. This means that us as parents, us as children, we're broken and fallen. And we hurt people we love. And in the first few weeks, with all this introspection that we've done, all this kind of reflecting back, which has been good, we've been able to make some connects with our childhood and how we might perceive God. But this is the week, this is like our pivotal week. And Kurt said it, and we are wrapping up, we're kind of gearing up the introspection. So if that was hard for a lot of us, and you're just like, you don't like doing that, it's done. That part is done, okay? Because now we are gearing up for the turn. And we're going to go through that this morning, and we're just going to call it the turn. But we are gearing up because, you know, you have to come to a place where you're done with all the reflection, you know, of what happened to my family and all of this and all of that. You know, that's good, but then we have to come to a place where it's like, okay, I got to turn from that, and now I need to move forward in that. You know, and how in the world do I move forward with these connects and this information about how I see God? Well, we move forward by looking at the ultimate model of a perfect parent, which is God, our Heavenly Father. And, you know, in order to make the turn, and in order to kind of head home where we belong, we have to dispel some of these misunderstandings that we have about God. Right? From our past, that they've influenced from our childhood, even ideas that we've projected to be true about God the Heavenly Father that maybe aren't true. And so this morning, we're going to kind of touch on three things. And, you know, you've heard Kurt mention that all of us are naturally separated. We just want to kind of mention that again, first off, this morning, that all of us are naturally separated from God. And there was a story that we've been using throughout this journey. And we're going to dive into it again this morning and hopefully pull out a few new things for you that you just haven't even thought about before. It's actually the longest story that Jesus ever told. And most people, you know, they just call it the prodigal son. Although it really doesn't have a title. Jesus didn't title his stories. And probably a better title would be the first few words of the story, which is a man who had two sons. And so we're going to take a look at that story again. Here's what Jesus says. It says, there was a man who had two sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. Now, can you imagine if your child came to you and said, Dad, Mom, I really don't care about you. I just care about your money. You know? I mean, some of you might be thinking, well, I don't have to imagine that. Like, I'm living it. You know, like, Mom, money for the movies. Mom, Dad, money for clothes. You know, I mean, we do feel like we're always doling out money, maybe to our children, but we're talking heartbreak. I mean, we're talking a son that is going to his father and basically saying to his dad, Dad, I would rather have your money than have you. I don't want to be around you. I want my inheritance now, and I want to leave and be separate and be all on my own. And we are kind of like that. You know, Jesus is illustrating that many of us are kind of like that younger brother, right? I mean, we would rather have the blessings of God than the presence of God, right? I mean, we would rather have a handout from God than a look into the face of God. I mean, we'd rather have those warm fuzzies, you know, it's all good, you know, from God, rather than having the full character of God in our lives that, you know, doesn't always give us those warm, squishy feelings. And this is totally natural, okay? All of us are like this because we are all naturally distant from God. You know, we would just rather have the perks of God, you know, rather than have God's presence or relationship in our lives. And so the son basically goes to his dad, and he's like, Dad, I know you're going to kick the bucket someday, and I don't want to wait. I just want your money. That's what I'm about right here. And so guess what happens? You probably know. The father allows this to happen. The father does this. The father allows his son to leave. And God gives us freedom. You know, God does not want to force you into a relationship with him. God gives us freedom. He doesn't want to force us to love him. You know, like the older son in the story kind of hung around the father out of obligation. He didn't really share the heart of the father. And we can be like that too at times. So the son leaves. Okay, he's blown all his money, you know, on just crazy living. Probably, you know, spent all his money on the stupid claw, you know, which I know if my kids had some money, they would spend all the money on the claw. But he probably did some of that, you know, it just, you know, some other sordid things. But he just reckless living. And so pretty soon he's penniless, he's broke, you know, he's homeless, he's got no friends, and he finds himself, he's feeding pigs. Now, we're like, well, that's not a big deal. But in the Jewish culture, okay, pigs are like the most unclean animals, the most unkosher food. I mean, that is like the lowest of the low. And so here he is, he's feeding pigs, and he's thinking about eating the pig slop. That's how bad it is for him. So for him, he is in the lowest of the low moment. And while he's in this moment, he has an aha moment. And so we're going to pick up the story again. It says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So I love this phrase, and honestly, I don't know why. But like when he came to his senses, that just strikes me as funny for some reason. And I think I'm thinking of like those old V8 commercials, you know, oh, I could have had a V8, you know. And yeah, old, thank you. One person remembers those. Okay, so, you know, but when he came to his senses, you know, when he came to his senses, basically what that means is he had a moment of confession. The younger son has a moment of confession in his mind that, you know what? He confesses to himself, whoa, I have messed up. I've blown it. I've sinned. I've just made a series of bad choices in my life. And for those of you who are in the small groups, you heard us talking about that, or maybe you're not in a small group, but hopefully you've been doing your guidebook, you have one of those. We've all been making a little bit of confession in our lives throughout this journey, whether we knew it or not, because when you're sharing with your group and when you've been writing things in your journal, you know, you are basically confessing truth. Now, maybe some of the truth that you've been confessing isn't what you want to be the truth, but that was your experience. That was the way you lived it. And so that was the truth of your reality. And you know, there is such power in confession instead of holding something in. And it can be hard to confess, but it's almost as if spiritual shackles come off of you and you are released when you confess. So the younger son confesses this reality to himself, and now he's decided he's going to make the journey home, so he can confess this to his dad. Now the son, you know, he thought when he left that he would be okay with just the blessings, right? I think I'll be all fine with the blessings. I can do this on my own. All I need is my stuff. But he wasn't. It wasn't enough. He didn't have the Father. And, you know, those are lies that we believe in our life, too. You know, I just need one more thing. One more child. One more step up the corporate ladder. One more accolade. And you know what? I think then I'm going to feel more one with God. Because then I'll have my life together. You know, then I'll feel good about myself. And so then, you know, but that's a lie. Because it's a lie that, you know, it just kind of permeates our life. Because what it does is it keeps us seeking for something. It keeps us looking for that thing, when really that one thing, you know, that we need, the way we've been wired, is God, is our Heavenly Father. And there is a great quote that kind of illustrates this, and it's from a book called Jesus plus Nothing Equals Everything. And here's what the quote says. It says, whatever security, happiness, relief, rescue, affirmation, meaning, and sense of purpose we are privileged enough to experience, it still isn't enough. Something within us hungers for what we don't yet have. And whether or not we realize it, this drives our every pursuit. We crave the more, sometimes wildly and illogically it seems, but consistently, recurrently. We'll try anything and everything to fill this vacuum we abhor. Okay, that's by that guy right there. Yeah. For fun later, we can meet out there and just try to say his name. But the book is called Jesus plus Everything, or Jesus plus Nothing Equals Everything. So